Today we're going to look at a continuation of turning the wrist out, kotegaishi, but actually it's more focusing on the forearm and turning the whole arm out and the dynamics that that creates with your opponent. So today I want to look at two old techniques that may not seem similar. They definitely don't catch your eye as kotegaishi, this outward turn, but they still involve turning the wrist and or lower arm, which torques the body. And we're going to look at Makura and Shiho Nage. So let's take a look at an arm drag. And typically an arm drag is, we're reaching across and trying to get to our opponent's back. And typically this is thought of in a linear fashion. The arm is being pulled directly in line, and my goal is to try to get to the outside. One thing that I don't see many people focus on is, what about up and down? What about taking the arm upwards or down as I'm doing the arm drag? And that's kind of what these old school techniques look at. So Makura, which means hand pillow, and we'll look at that in a minute. Basically the technique is, I'm doing an arm drag, but instead of pulling, I'm actually forcing her to the ground. And there's the nice, isn't that soft? Nice pillow made from the hand. Not that that's going to be an every time scenario, but the focus is that the arm drag isn't just pulling where she can resist. If she pulls back and we're trying to fight, it's hard to get to the rear. But if I pull down, it changes the dynamic. And if you notice the wrist and the arm, this is that kotegaishi similar turn. So again, the torque of the hand, if I start torquing and you think, well, this is wrist joint pain, it could be. But even just torquing the lower arm, eventually when the elbow starts to point in, there's no pain here. It just causes her body to shift. So if we torque and lower at the same time, there's a different dynamic. Now, how could this be useful immediately standing? The arm drag, if I drop her down, notice that my ability to start wrapping up a choke is so much cleaner than trying to get to her back here and reach, right? So simply focusing on the grip at the thumb and the hand. The one that's on the elbow, I'm actually helping guide and push, but I'm going down. So whether she drops or tries to resist, I'm just in a better position. So she could be reactive and fight and block every attempt that I'm trying to do for choking. But if I just pull her forward, it's still much more of a fight than down, right? Just dropping her in a vertical sense rather than just pulling a horizontal. Just a big change. So what about the arm going up, right? So we just looked at twisting and pushing down, which is, again, similar to an old technique. What about going up, and what does that look like? So there's the torque and rising. Obviously it makes her go up on her toes, and it's not significant pain at the moment, but just this torque makes her hips go up. And this is a technique that many Aikido and Aikijujutsu folks would recognize as Shiho Nage, which is four direction throw, like a sword. I could throw. I think that this could be one of the most dangerous throws in jiu-jitsu, in grappling, because it really could add torque and damage a lot of joints all up in one attempt. But it's usually, in my mind, performed a little soft, where the opponent could simply get out of it. So I'm going to attempt this to throw her with the most dangerous throw. Let's try that again. It's not a dance.
Do you really want me to give me another roll out of this?
This is dangerous. She keeps dancing.
What do you want me to do?
All joking aside, I'm not doing anything to make her feel in pain at the moment. She just feels the need to spin out because she's not a trained Aikidoka. So she doesn't know that she's supposed to fall with this technique, and she keeps do-si-doing.
Where would you like me to fall?
She said, "Where would you like me to fall?" And I think that's a fallacy in a lot of the traditional training, because if she's not cooperative and my technique fails, it's my fault. And I think that that is indicative of the technique. If I perform the technique slightly different, a different outcome happens. And obviously I had to be nice and easy on that transition, because many ligaments could have been torn in that scenario. We'll do that again.
Could you imagine if that was fast? I could.
No, imagining
Yeah.
we're gonna do it.
Oh my.
Your face is not hard.
Well, we'll work this technique from the ground where she's able to escape easier. But the technique, there's nothing wrong with the technique of, again, rolling the forearm in and continuing to torque. The only problem is I don't have her under duress at the moment. Now I could try to extend faster than her and I could toss her, but there's a way to perform the technique, and this may be details for another video, that causes significant pain. But we'll take a look at that later. So again, an arm drag straight is a great technique. Torquing the arm helps you get to the back. Torquing the arm and lowering has a different dynamic. Torquing the arm and rising, a different dynamic. Now that may look like something that you'd never use in Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, but we actually do have self-defense technique where we pull over our shoulder, okay? Raise the elbow so she can't escape. This is a straight arm lock, and it's a good self-defense technique. But what happens if she starts to bend her bicep? Maybe she's stronger. I just follow it, and it becomes this Shiho Nage outward wrist turn with the elbow high. So one more look at pulling and lifting. Again, an arm drag. If I can raise it and go straight to this self-defense, that's a great arm break, unless she's too strong and folding it backwards. I shouldn't fight this though, I should just turn. And now I have her in this position. Obviously there's a drop from here, but if you look, if you can regain your balance, simply looking at the position of her hand, this is Kotegaeshi. It's the same technique that we've looked at in a different video. I'm just looking at it or grabbing it from a different hand position. And if I want to throw, I can throw. If I want to drop, I can drop. But getting someone to this position is pretty difficult in a live randori situation. And if you do get there, my opinion is your training partner has a very high chance of being injured, because that speed required is going to hit 3 different joints with pain at the same time. So if I do the technique in a traditional Aikido fashion, she's not supposed to feel pain, right? It's compliant, but even if she's not compliant and I catch everything in this nice smooth motion, I could throw her, I could pin her, but without the pain and intensity involved, I think there's a higher chance of escape. That did not hurt.
It doesn't hurt.
If it doesn't hurt, it doesn't mean that the technique isn't working. I mean, that could be a higher level, right? But I know that compliant, making my opponent compliant through structural alignment and pain, sometimes that's just more fun, sorry. So tell me where you feel pain in this technique. Is it a wrist? Is it your elbow? Where is the
for here at the
Yeah.
wrist, elbow, and then elbow.
So traditional Hanmi Nage, this is a half seated, half standing. She's trying to keep me from grabbing my sword, whatever the scenario, can be done from either side. She's starting to feel this pain, and I'm being cautious not to throw her or injure her joints as I toss her, but we end up in the same position. And I want to look at a few pins from having the arm folded, again, similar to kotegaishi. It is this outward wrist turn, but I want to look at a few pins that are viable in live randori session. So we'll take a look at what do we do, how do we attach to this position, and then how do we pin once we have this in the next episode, actually coming up right now. So before we talk about how to get in this position from scenarios in grappling on the ground, we looked at the takedown traditionally from Shiho Nage or the like. She's just bending her bicep. I'm not on the inside, I'm actually on the outside, reaching under and grabbing her wrist. Her palm is not facing the sky, her palm is facing down. So this is the technique. Very simple finish would be, and some of you may see this already, this is going to be just a wrist lock. If I can make the wrist touch the ground and press on the elbow, that's just a standard wrist lock. Now, if it's out here where these knuckles are touching the ground, that's probably going to be a worse wrist lock because now I have angle to push. If I have just her wrist touching, there's more structure against her bone, not as much on the wrist. But I can continue pulling. Okay, so step number one, make the knuckles touch the ground and finish by pressure. Number two, I can keep pulling this under, actually pull it under so far that now I'm focusing on stretching from underneath her arm. This kind of goes all the way down to the hip. And I stretch this until she either taps. Usually we like to watch for the hips to rise because that adds pressure. This can be painful in the elbow joint if it's inflamed or injured, but it's really a stretch that goes through the body. And I usually like to do a knee on belly as I capture this, pull it all the way underneath, and then drive forward. One that's probably much more common is kind of like an Americana, but up by the head. I'm going to show a few examples of that. Okay, I have, again, outside, palm down, wrist lock. I can pull and stretch, but there's a very simple finish here without me adding any body pressure. And it's a torque similar to an Americana. I'm pulling her wrist out. Notice the elbow follows. So if I hold the elbow and pull the wrist out, that's a shoulder lock. Typically, the way we finish this is with a knee in the armpit because this adds a lot more pressure. So again, I'm pulling out and driving the elbow forward. Very common. This can be accomplished from a very traditional, actually there's kind of a 3-series arm bar technique that I learned years ago in judo from Keisagatami. So from Keisagatami, if her arm is straight, I can get a straight arm lock. If she bends her arm, we know we can tuck it under the shin, but I like to follow up, and it's nice Americana. But if she gets it all the way up to her head, then we have kind of a gift wrap scenario. All I'm going to do in this situation is bury my head, and I'm going to switch arms. So now I'm doing the same technique. I'm using my head to press her elbow, and I'm pulling her shoulder by extending her hand away from her body. So again, anytime Keisagatami, their arm gets up here, this nice gift wrap, I'm just putting my head on the other side, driving her elbow, switching hands, and pulling this. Now, of course, there's wrist locks here, but just this straight torque is enough to cause sufficient pressure. So how do I get into this outward wrist turn position on the outside of her arm in the middle of a roll? Where does this come in? It's going to be kind of hard from knee on belly I usually fit into this fairly easy from more of a north-south reaching for a choke. So if I'm holding position and I start reaching in for a choke of any sort, you see how she grabbed my hand? If I simply slide my hand back, I'm actually in this position. So maybe she's framing, trying to hold off. I'm sneaking in for a choke, and here's her hand. So I simply make this connection, fold it as we did before, knee in the armpit, pull for the shoulder torque, or go for the wrist lock. So it's not unrealistic to get in this Shiho Nage type throw pinning position from the ground. It's as simple as reaching for the choke. Here's the hand. I go immediately to the elbow and roll it back and I start this pin actually, and then I'll start torquing. If I just torque, it's obvious that she's just going to roll out. Doesn't mean that I'm in any inferior position. I just miss the opportunity for the submission. So I'm cognizant of that. As I reach for the choke, I maintain pressure on the elbow and I drive, and I'm torquing on the backside, but very easy to get into that position from north-south, attempting a lapel choke. This is Makura, a hand pillow. I'm bringing my hand up. Traditionally, if somebody is resisting, they may try to elbow as I'm holding them, and this allows us to catch the other hand. We actually looked at this in a different video. I'm actually maintaining this wrist lock on the ground under her head, and here I'm just controlling her other arm, right? Maybe unrealistic, actually probably highly unrealistic against trained jiu-jitsu athletes, but not this piece. This piece of the entry from the initial attack, we're going to look at off of an arm drag. So without looking at the Judy chop or the traditional Yokomenuchi strike to the head, we looked at this standing, right? So I can still do an arm drag, but instead of just trying to pull to get to her back, I'm purposefully twisting the lower forearm. I'm not trying to pay attention to the wrist as much. I just want this arm to turn. So turn the arm down, it just naturally throws your opponent. So they can take a nice nap on their own hand pillow while I work on some back technique or side control. Think of doing a normal arm drag. First hand grabs the wrist, second hand grabs the elbow, you pull and you try to get it to my back. Just go ahead and do a normal arm drag. Try it and push everything up as you do the arm drag as well. Okay, so see it naturally lifts me. Now try it and push everything down. But if you pull me continually out, I'll probably be able to fight you. So try that. Still do a straight arm drag down, but as you're torquing out, I'm still able to fight. But if you drop me right where I am, okay, that's so much different. Yeah. And yeah, that's a good grip. We'll try that one more time.
Like this?
Just come in to grab. Make sure that this is not just pulling. Now this is actually torquing as well. Yeah. Like that. Torquing that to give you the kind of some thought process. If you just pull, I'm going to fight. If you turn this straight down to the mat, that's going to pin me. But if you affect my body by try to make me act like you're hitting me with my own elbow, but drop this to the mat. Okay. It makes me fall over. Now, will I try to explode and fight out of that? Sure. But now if you give all of that same thought, but pull me right in front of your knee.
And I still take your elbow to your...
Right. It almost makes me roll. I had to hold my balance. If I did start rolling, and you capture it like an omoplata, you block me. Right now, time for bed.
I grab you, but you grab me.
If we're both here,
Yeah, if we're both fighting for it. We both can try.
we look at the camera and say go. I mean, this is just a battle, like who's gonna get what, right? But if I start to try to disengage, if you ever can get me across my center line, yeah. Or maybe I push you back and then pull because that give and take. Yeah, there you go. Messed up.
He messed it up.
He went from this to that.
I'm helping you get video, the clipboard thing.
Got it. It's not me, guys, really. Okay. Hey, thanks for taking a look at another view of kotegaeshi, the outward wrist turn. This time we looked at it more from an arm drag scenario and the implications of raising and lowering your opponent's arm.
Good job.
Thanks.
Yes, you have to yell Judy chop.
Judy chop.